and your voice would not be clear. So, all right, I'm really sorry. Your time begins now.
Good afternoon. This is Section E, and my name is Sinjan. Our title for discussion today is The Greatest Tragedy is Indifference. Now, I'm going to make my point by narrating an incident which happened about 4 years ago. The date was July 6, 2013. Asiana Airlines Flight 214 was traveling from Incheon in South Korea towards San Francisco Airport. At 11:26 a.m. local time, it received clearance for landing, and it was scheduled to touch down within 2 minutes. The weather was good, visibility excellent, and yet something went terribly wrong within those 2 minutes. The plane landed short of the runway, hit a sidewall, and ended up in a pile of smoke to the left of the runway. 3 teenagers died instantly, and 50 people were critically injured. Now the question is, what went wrong? Now the technical part was the autothrottle had malfunctioned, and the airspeed which was being indicated on the airspeed indicator was actually higher than what they were traveling at. So they didn't have the adequate speed to make the touchdown. But I want to divert your attention to the communication part. The pilot in command did not even have any clue that there was any trouble. The co-pilot realized that something was wrong, and he pointed at the airspeed indicator and told the captain, "Captain, I don't think that is right." The captain said, "It's going to be fine. It's going to be a routine landing." 30 seconds later, he repeated his words. He repeated the warnings. And yet, this time, it wasn't even met with any reply from the pilot in command. Now, the pilot, obviously, as I mentioned before, the result was tragic because people died. Now, this pilot had 3,500 hours of flying experience, while the co-pilot had only 45 hours of flying experience. The larger point I wanted to make through this example is that of a universal problem. If you think you're smart, if you think you're more experienced, if you think you're senior to somebody, you might be tempted to believe that you know more than them, and you don't need to listen to anybody. But in the real world, it doesn't work that way. It might come back to bite you, and you might not even live to regret that. That would be all from my side. Prachi would take over.
They don't care. Indian government was accused by the Chakma group of Northeast India recently in a daily newspaper. Next, Abhinav Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, said, 7 to 8 Northeast Indian states are responsible for holding back the growth of the nation. Yes, you guessed it right. I am talking about the indifferent attitudes that people from mainland India have towards Northeast region. Northeast states might contribute a meager of 4% of the total population, but they are a home to 300 different ethnic groups. But due to different reasons like linguistic, cultural, and ethnic identity and diversity, they are historically neglected by the successive governments and you. Citing an incident at World Book Fair, New Delhi, National Book Trust organized a Northeast India quiz. The participants could not even qualify the quiz, let alone winning it. The reason for it can be attributed towards a national policy of education. The history books prescribed by the CBSE have miserably failed to throw any light whatsoever on the history, culture, and tradition of this Northeast region. For example, how many of us sitting over here know about Kian Nanbag, a freedom fighter from Meghalaya who was hanged 50 years back by the Britishers? All this due to the sheer indifference shown by the central government towards the history of this region. Now you might ask, what is so tragic about it? Okay guys, Northeast is landlocked. It is connected towards the rest of the country only by a narrow strip of land which is known as Chicken's Corridor. It is so logistically disconnected by the rest of the country that it has led to a sense of psychological alienation. It has led to a feeling that Northeast is so far that is even closer to China. Elaborating on it further, it has led to some serious implications. It has led to the growth of separatist and anti-national movements, which are aided and abetted by both anti-Indian forces inside and outside the country. It has led to illegal immigration from Bangladesh. This has had serious impact on the demographics of this region, and it has also led to social religious tensions between the immigrants and the tribes of this country. Thus, we see a small indifferent attitude 68 years back has led to a complete state of chaos in our own region of the country. Next, I have Lohit, who will talk about another impact that indifferent attitudes has had on another domain of life.
Thank you, Prachi. Now I will touch upon the domain of technology. In the world of today, technology is advancing continuously. We live in a fast-changing and increasingly technical world. So no matter which sector or industry a business is in, it must keep up with advances in technology. Being indifferent towards the changing technology is the last thing a business would want to do. Mobile phones form a big part of today's digital world. All of us own cell phones, but we never forget our first cell phone. So how many of you here had a Nokia as a first cell phone? That's a lot of you. So let's take the example of Nokia to understand the perils of indifference in the world of technology. We all know the time when Nokia was the market leader in the mobile phone segment. When Nokia was on top, nobody could touch it. That kind of success eventually bred an obstinate attitude and a feeling of indifference towards the changing technology. At its peak in 2007, Nokia's market value was about $250 billion US. This was the year when Apple launched the first generation iPhone. Contrary to public misperception, Apple did not invent the smartphone. The iPhone was the first touchscreen smartphone. It brought a new sense of what a smartphone could do and who could benefit from such a device. Virtually everything and everyone. This was also the time when Google's Android operating system began to take off and Nokia's Symbian software was starting to show its age. Still, Nokia refused to jump on the touchscreen bandwagon, again showing its inability to adapt to new technology. It waited a year after the original iPhone launched to unveil its first touchscreen smartphone, the Nokia 5800, which ran the outdated Symbian OS. Unfortunately, it was less a smartphone and more a handset optimized to play music. During this time, some of the company's current and former employees have opined that the reason that Nokia stuck to Symbian OS was due to its inability to take risks. This was the beginning of the end for Nokia. At its peak in 2007, Nokia's market value was about $250 million US. Fast forward to 2013, Microsoft officially acquired Nokia's devices and services for about $7 million. This purchase price represents about 1/35 of Nokia's peak value. As a quote says, because of indifference, one dies before one actually dies. Now I would call upon Agam to take over.
Everyone, I'll be talking from another dimension, that is talking about indifference from a legal and judicial perspective. So let me take you all back to the emergency era, when in the notoriously famous ADM Jabalpur case, the Supreme Court famously ruled that a person who has been detained, who is the aggrieved party, did not even have the right to know the cause or the duration of his arrest. But I think this judicial indifference towards the rights of us countrymen has subsided over the years. The public interest litigation system introduced in the late 1980s is a prime example for this. Under the PIL system, the Supreme Court overruled the existing locus standi concept, and now even a concerned individual, including you and me, can file a writ or petition, even if we are not the directly aggrieved party, in the name of societal good or national interest. So this has brought the judiciary at the very core, and it is not indifferent to the needs of the society. If I were to quote a few examples of how the PAL system has brought about landmark judgments, the examples that would typically come to the top of my mind, the recent Triple Talaq pronouncement, or the Aruna Shah Nabag, that is the passive euthanasia case, etc. Also, another point that I would like to draw your attention to is, it's not only about not being indifferent by allowing people to turn activists using the PIL tool. The judiciary is now also actively taking suo motu cognizance of a number of things to keep itself and the other organs of the state accountable. So this is from being indifferent and acting as a stooge of the government to being at the forefront of the societal change. This is how our judiciary has progressed. However, I would also like to point a contrarian point of view. Indifference is not always a vice for the judicial system. In any given case, the jury and the judge has to decide based on the merits of the case and be indifferent to the stature of the prosecuting party or the accused party. This is where the concept of recusal and propriety comes in. I remember a famous US Supreme Court judge say that I must recuse myself from the case because I feel very strongly about it. Drawing an analogy, I would also like to draw an analogy here with the movie screened by Sir, 12 Angry Men. Here, all the people who came with preconceived notions of the boy's identity, of the locality, or of the community which he belonged to, were not actually serving the cause of justice. They were actually serving their self-serving biases. However, a person who was indifferent to all these external factors and considered only the merits of the case was the one who was trying to prove or disprove that the boy committed the murder beyond a reasonable doubt. So just to conclude, in my opinion, the judiciary has to be indifferent in terms of a particular case that comes before it, but as a larger society, keeping the larger societal good in mind, it needs to take into account the aspirations and the values of the people. And now I hand over to Shraddha to talk about the human concept of indifference.
I would start by asking you a question. How many of you know about the Johari window? Please raise your hand if you know about it. So there is a part which is called blind spot. This blind spot is basically the qualities that you do not associate yourself with, but the others around you or your peers associate you with those qualities. So these are the qualities which you do not know you possess. They could be negative or could be positive. These qualities are what you are unaware of, and this unawareness can sometimes lead to indifference. How does it impact you now? So, for example, if there is a negative quality in you, for example, you are very dominant in a group setup. You don't know about it, but the others can see it. And maybe even if you know about it, you're not very consciously acting towards it. So what do you lose by that? You are dominant, so others are not very perceptive of your presence. They do not want to make you friends. So you're losing out on your social life. Your social life is taking a hit. If it is a positive quality, what happens then? You're missing out on opportunities. For example, if you are an excellent orator, but you do not know about it, you will not go and take those opportunities which demand this quality. So you're losing out on those opportunities. Now moving on to the environmental part of it. All of us hear how it is very important to be conservative in environment, to conserve our environment, achieve environmental sustainability, not litter around, and we also know the consequences that it has. For example, the sewers get choked up if you litter too much, or there is a stink, there is soil pollution, etc., etc. We all know about it. But how many of us actually work towards it? We are indifferent, right? We have given the onus, we are not taking the onus on ourselves to take responsibility in our hands. So this is one of the indifference. Also, there is a general trend. A survey has suggested that there is a general trend of us moving towards more and more environmental indifference in the context that earlier we used to regard global warming as one of our top priorities, but recently it has shifted a lot of ranks below. This could also be because of emergence of various global leaders who do not put that much priority on global warming or these issues, these environmental issues. So this could also be a reason. The other reason could also be that our needs are not getting satisfied. Our needs for affiliation, for power are not getting satisfied by working on environmental sustainability. At the end, I would like to conclude this by saying that indifference is the most powerful feeling that you can have. It turns everything meaningless. Love and hate do not stand a chance against it. So I hope we have covered a 360-degree view of what indifference is regarding various aspects, and thank you.